So, hello everybody. In this video I want to show you some examples how to work with Linux disks. We also want to use Linux Volume Manager and we want to create RAID array. These are the basic operations on Linux disks. In the first episode we start by doing the basic setups because we need of course a Linux environment, and the preferred method is to use a virtual machine so that you can't do any damage on your real machine. So it's always a good idea to do those kind of exercises in a virtual environment. So that's actually the first step what we need. What we need is some kind of a hypervisor. If you work with Windows, especially with Windows Professional Edition, you can enable Hyper-V, so this is the default hypervisor. Of course, you can install other hypervisors like VirtualBox or VMware. So this is up to you what you want to use, and I will use an environment which is called Multipass. Multipass is a set of scripts which allows us to work a little bit more easier with this Hyper-V environment. So this is a set of scripts from Canonical. Multipass actually uses Hyper-V behind the scenes. If you run Windows Home Edition, you have to install VirtualBox first. So this is another option, unless you enable Hyper-V on Windows Home, which is possible in theory but not officially supported. The big advantage when we use this Multipass environment is that it works on Windows, it works on Mac OS, it works on Linux, so the commands are actually the same. Before we use Multipass, we need to enable Hyper-V first. If not already enabled, then please go to the setup on your system. So I go to Windows Setup or Windows Settings. I go to System, scroll down to Optional Features. Again, scroll down, so I'll go to More Windows Features, and this brings in this dialog box where I can enable different Windows features, and what we actually need is this Hyper-V. So it's already checked on my machine, so please make sure that this Hyper-V is enabled. This one, we have the management tool and the platform itself, select both of them, and if you select Hyper-V, then you probably need to restart your machine because Hyper-V is a layer between the operating system and the hardware. So if this is new, then please enable Hyper-V and restart your Windows machine. So the next thing what we need to do then is to install Multipass. This is the web page. We go to multipass.run, which is a redirect to this one, so we can simply type the name multipass.run as a URL in the US bar address bar, which then redirects to Canonical.com Multipass. The advantages: this is available on major operating systems. So when we install, we have the option to install this in Linux. We can install this on Windows, and we can also install this on Mac OS, which then uses the basic hypervisor from Apple. So the commands what we will then use in upcoming examples are actually the same for those operating systems. If you don't want to use this, then another option is to install the virtual machine manually. But let's first start with Multipass, and then I probably give you an idea how you also can do this manually. So this is the installation. So if this is installed, so I've installed this on my machine. So the next thing what we want to do is open a terminal and go to Windows tab, and we can simply type terminal. This opens the Windows Terminal app. If you have a Windows 10 machine running, then it's probably not installed by default. Then simply open PowerShell. This is another option. You can use Terminal app, which internally uses PowerShell, or you can also direct PowerShell and use this environment. Both will work because we need some kind of a terminal. So use terminal, this one. then it brings up this terminal window, or if this is not installed on your machine, then use PowerShell, which brings us the default window for PowerShell on my machine, which in this case is the same, but in the old Windows this is a blue background, but the prompt looks the same way like this one. This is our terminal window. So in order to make sure if this thing is working, the multipass, then type the command multipass. So this is, if this command works, then the multipass is installed. And here we have a couple of different commands available for creating and stopping and restarting virtual machines. And the big advantage is you simply can launch an instance by a single command line, which again is the same. If you would type this in Mac, you would go please to the Mac Terminal app. If you run on Linux, you can still use your own Linux, of course, or you can also use a terminal session. So the first thing what we need to do is we need to launch a virtual machine. So the command is quite simple: multipass launch, and then give it a name, -n for name, and then I name this operating system OPSYS for our lecture. So this is all what we need to create a new virtual machine. When you do this for the very first time, you might see a small delay because it downloads the image first. I already downloaded the image, so it goes a little bit faster on my machine. You simply have to wait until this download is complete. But then when we press enter, what happens now? It creates a new virtual machine on Hyper-V and is configuring the instance, and then we can connect to it. So you don't need to configure anything else. You don't need to do setup, username, password, configuration options, or whatever what you normally have to do manually. Because what this thing is doing, it creates an instance of an Ubuntu, of the latest Ubuntu image. It creates the standard user called Ubuntu. This is the standard user, and it also creates a public-private key pair, so we don't need to provide any passwords for login because it saved the private key on a secure folder, which is then used to connect to this instance. So that's this. Now this is running, and in order to verify if this thing runs, type multipass list. This gives you a list of all running instances to only verify that everything was correct. You see I have two instances running. This is another machine on my machine, and this is our newly created virtual machine. And in order to connect to this new instance, you type multipass shell and then the name. The name is OPSYS, and here we are inside a virtual machine, that's all. And then you can work with it, and the advantage, of course, you can't do any damage there. If you destroy the system, then recreate it and nothing happens to your host machine. So that's the big advantage on using multipass. So that's what we need, because we need root access. If this is not working for some reasons, another option is, of course, to create a virtual machine manually. On Windows you might want to use Hyper-V or VirtualBox. If you run on Mac, there's a software called UTM. Or in Linux you have this QEMU KVM software running. Want to give you a short idea how this works on Windows, because you can directly go to the Hyper-V manager. So this is optional. If multipass is running in the first place, you don't need to do this step. So this is only, you see, this is what we just created. This was done behind the scenes. If you want to manually create a new instance, you can here go to Quick Create. And then there's a couple of selections. Select the latest Ubuntu image and create a virtual machine. And this downloads the image from the Ubuntu version 22 and then creates an instance. This takes a little bit longer because it first downloads the image and then it installs the Ubuntu machine along with a graphical UI, which is a little bit more overhead, so actually we don't need this full environment. So we are completely fine with the multipass environment. So let's wait for a second and then we go on. So now the download is almost complete, and then it should create your virtual machine. Okay, extraction is complete, and now the machine was created successfully. We can connect to it, and this is the connection to this virtual machine, and then we power it on. So it's now booting. This is the Hyper-V environment, and then we should see now we have our installation ready. In this case it uses the graphical UI, which is not really necessary, which is a little bit more overhead because we mainly work with the command line. But anyway, if you prefer to use this graphical UI, this is working. Takes of course a couple of seconds to bring in all the settings. Okay, you have to give the system configuration, the English language. Probably I will use the German keyboard layout for mine, and it's very small settings. Time zone should be normally set correct. Then you have to give this thing a name. Call this OPSYS2. Use OPSYS as the name and OPSYS2 for the machine. And then we have to create a user, and we have to choose a password. So I use a weak password here only for testing, and then it creates a couple of things, and then we should be up and ready with our new virtual machine. Scanning hardware, making a small changes. Now we are ready. Again some changes. This is probably the update sequence that it downloads the latest version of the software. Again we wait a second. So it reconnects. So here this is the connection, and I connect to this machine, and here we are, we have our Ubuntu machine running. So the only thing what we need is the terminal session, and I click to terminal. So this is our terminal session. So now we also have a virtual machine running. You see this takes a little longer because it is a full UI machine. Ask about some configurations, but basically what Multipass did is more or less the same behind the scenes, with one exception: it does not install the graphical UI by default. We don't need this for our purposes, and so it's perfectly fine to use Multipass. So this is only an option if Multipass is not working. You can also do this manually if you want. We are fine if you have this Multipass connection from the beginning, that's fine. And this is our starting point where we jump in, and now then we'll do the exercises based on disks. So this concludes the setup portion. In the next episode we talk about how to add and manage disks.